recognize from the stories that have been shared by the women, when we started this training through the introductions, where they spoke a lot about their experiences so far as activists getting into politics, or also as upcoming politicians. And many of the challenges really point to the prevalence of violence against women who are in politics in Zimbabwe. And what we have heard from the stories really is that the violence happen across all levels of society. So they experience the violence in the home from family members, they experience the violence in the community, they experience the violence also from the state. There is state-instigated violence against women in politics. And what we are doing here is to also interrogate how, as women coming from different political parties and political spaces, for those who are coming in as independents, we can actually come up with a framework that we can table to government and independent commissions to consider, for them to be able to actually tackle violence against women in politics.
The objective of our meeting today is to reflect on violence against women in politics. When we are talking of violence against women in politics, to me, it is an escalation because of the nature of the role that we all play as women in politics.
So this particular meeting, as the speakers before me have already alluded to, it's focusing on violence against women, and particularly women in politics. So at a global level, we have 1 in 3 women who are affected by violence against women in their lifetime. And even when we come to Zimbabwe, 1 in 3 women have actually experienced physical violence. We are talking about physical. And we are in the space where we are talking about human rights. It's part of my human right. But we're not talking about 1 in 3 facing physical, inhumane physical violence. That's a very significant number. And also 1 in 3 women have faced sexual violence in their number. So just those statistics alone, they can tell you that what we are dealing with is something that is very prevalent at a global level as well as in our country. So our solution has been us getting into leadership positions, and in this case, getting into politics, so that we can represent ourselves and mitigate violence against women. But sadly, the reality is that in the very same place where we want to get freedom as women, which is in politics, we want to represent ourselves, we want to represent others. But in that very same space, unfortunately, more violence is perpetuated.
They are now advocates for women as physical, psychological wellness and defense training. This is in countries like England and also in the States, who are now insisting that women should be physically capable to also defend themselves. There's need to educate women in politics on the options available should they need to report abuse or violations.
We are also having a conversation around how to mitigate violence against women, and we recognize the need for that framework to be inclusive, and hence you've seen representatives of political parties across the political divide in Zimbabwe. You've also seen women who have contested as independent candidates, and you've also seen women who are actually in independent commissions, women in the Ministry of Women's Affairs, women coming from various civil society and community-based organizations to come together and really interrogate how we can contribute towards a national framework of responding to violence against women in politics.
I think now we know the depth of violence against women when it comes to our political environment. And I think the question now that we can raise as a group is what now? There's been a lot of talk, even in different circles, of women that are violated, and most of us are victims. Either way, it has affected us. Either way, when you get to watch news, when you get to read anything on Twitter, on any social media platform. So I think now the question is, what now? What is it that we can do? We need to just remove the jackets of where we are coming from and stand as women and say, what is it that we can do as women to change the narrative, to change the systems that are fighting against our women, that are fighting against women living with disabilities, that are fighting against women, elderly women in the rural areas, grassroots grassroots level, there are a lot of issues that are emerging.
Violence against women in politics definitely accounts for the low representation and participation of young women and women across all levels of political engagement. And also acknowledging that women are affected differently by different forms of violence in politics. So yes, we may acknowledge that violence is pervasive across the political divide, but we realize that the different forms of violence then have a different impact on women. There is need to, be deliberate in terms of coming up with measures to mitigate gendered violence against women in order for us to deal with the pandemic. In as much as we are providing a fertile ground for women to learn from each other, to provide mentorship, to support each other and give each other solidarity, as long as violence continues to happen, it will be very, very difficult for this country to attain gender equality.